Let's get this show on the road, unless there's any objections.
Nope, it's all you, John.
All right. Well, welcome. I'm here today talking about JEA, coming to you from Redmond, Washington, which is not sunny, but pretty pleasant this time of year. So this presentation is called JEA, a PowerShell toolkit to secure a post-known world. It is pretty much a duplicate of the presentation that I did with Jeffrey Snover at Ignite. That presentation is recorded, so you can view pretty much the same thing I'm going to present here with Jeffrey talking for parts of it if you would like at some point in the future. But that being said, let's go ahead and get started. So this guy is Michael Hayden. Michael Hayden is a 4-star general. He's director of the NSA, director of the CIA, director of national intelligence. And Michael Hayden's a pretty smart guy, and he has 3 things going for him. 1, he has a lot of money. I don't know if there's anybody in the world that has a bigger budget than Michael Hayden to secure stuff. 2, he has a lot of really smart people working for him. And 3, he has a lot of things that he would like to keep secret, right? I think he might have the most of those 3 things of anybody in the world. Now, this is Edward Snowden. Edward Snowden is a 30-year-old college dropout. Now, let's look at the interaction between these 2 guys. Gentlemen, to your corners. So Michael Hayden made a decision that each of you has to make every single day. Every single business or organization makes this decision, and that is to make someone else an administrator. And that was by far the worst decision Michael Hayden made during his tenure. And the reason for that is administrators have the keys to the kingdom. By making Edward Snowden an administrator, he basically opened himself up for all of the things that Snowden did, and those things were malicious towards the NSA. So the key insight here is that admins have the keys to the kingdom. And in fact, in one of the documents leaked by Edward Snowden, called Hunting and Hacking System Administrators, the document says, who better to target than the person that already has the keys to the kingdom? Right? So the NSA is targeting system administrators, and they aren't targeting system administrators because they think that you're terrorists or they think that you're out to hurt the United States government. They're targeting system administrators because they have access to the systems that the NSA wants access to, and by gaining administrator privilege on those systems, they can propagate throughout the environment and do basically whatever it is that they're looking to do. So the key insight, the one thing I want you guys to take out of this presentation, if you didn't already know it, is that administrators are an attack surface. It's not, you know, we used to think about your attack surface, kind of the boundary of your network. You know, you got firewall rules and whatnot, but really the people are also part of your attack surface. Somebody leaves a USB in a parking lot, plugs it in, sends a spear phishing mail, a phishing attack, you know, social engineering attacks. All that stuff goes into administrators are an attack surface. So there's kind of 2 forms that this can take. One is insider attacks. So Snowden is an example of this, where Snowden was given administrator privileges, and he used those administrator privileges to the detriment of the NSA. You could also think about, I think Sony might have, but we aren't quite sure. But there's other examples. According to Verizon's data breach report from 2014, 19% of data breaches were classified as insider abuse. Another form this can take is in terms of stolen credentials. The use of stolen credentials was actually the top threat action of 2013 across a variety of classifications of data breaches, according to Verizon. And this can take the form of a pass-the-hash attack or any different number of things. So one is the person themselves is malicious. The second is their credentials get stolen by somebody else. And to compound this problem, most administration is binary. So what do I mean by that? Generally what it means is that either you're a full admin in Windows or you're not an admin, right? And we do have these islands of role-based access control, right, provided by specific applications, but these islands of RBAC typically only are suited for that application. They don't extend beyond the application. They don't provide a control past the boundaries of that application. And typically, they're pretty large-grained about what you can allow users to do. There's no real general platform solution for Windows in terms of role-based access control of administrator actions. So, thinking about that problem, administrators are an attack surface. They can get, you can either have malicious insiders within your organization, or your credentials could get stolen. Thinking about all of that different area, wouldn't it be great if we could, one, reduce the number of full admins in a given environment? Two, wouldn't it be great if we could limit the movement of those full administrator accounts? Wouldn't it be great if we could granularly control what actions an administrator can take? And four, wouldn't it be great if we could log all admin actions? And with these four things, you can kind of see a picture of reducing that attack surface, understanding what administrators are doing, controlling what they can do, and logging those actions. And that is pretty much what Just Enough Administrator is designed to do. It's a role-based access control for administrator actions for Windows. It is entirely through PowerShell remoting. Operators do not have full administrator accounts with JEA. Instead, they run as an administrator account on specific machines for specific actions. It's built on existing PowerShell security techniques. And one really important thing to call out right here, JEA is not anti-administrator. We aren't saying you have to get rid of all administrators. What we're saying is that you have to understand that administrators and administrative privileges really are a part of your attack surface, and you should take the time to understand what those are and see if you can reduce that attack surface, just like you do with everything else. So just wanted to be 100% clear about that. So that's JEA at a high level, and so let's start by looking at a demo of using JEA. But actually, before I do that, I'd like to show you guys a couple of comics that kind of illustrate my point. So this comic is from Saturday Morning Breakfast Cereal. I don't know if you guys have seen it, read it, but in the comic, you know, you see movie hacking, and it's filled with tons of buzzwords. I can just overclock the Unix Django. I can basic the DDoS root. It's meaningless. But real hacking, hey, this is Robert Hackerman. I'm the county password inspector. Hi, Bob. How can I help you today? Right? There's a great video from, I think it was Black Hat a few years ago, where on stage they compromised somebody by just calling him, saying that they were from HR. This is an IT guy saying they were from HR, and then getting him to go to some website and entering his credentials. Another example of this is actually on, I think a while ago, ISIS supposedly hacked some French newspaper, and people were really freaking out. They were like, ISIS, they've got hackers, and when they really investigated and figured out what went on, they figured out that there was a newspaper reporter, television reporter, and that reporter was interviewing a guy in the French newspaper, and behind him in the interview, there was a printout with all of the administrator passwords being broadcast on national television, and they just took those administrator passwords. So that's another example of, you know, somebody just printing off admin passwords, and that's a way that they can get stolen. Another example of comics is XKCD, a crypto nerd's imagination versus reality. One is, oh, I've secured my system with this 4096-bit RSA. It's going to take me years to decrypt it. versus what would actually happen is hit him with a $5 wrench until he tells us the password. So those are two little comics, but back to JEA. So what does using JEA look like? So I'm going to go over here to my demo machine. And on my demo machine, I have two consoles, one on the left, one on the right. Now, I've got it at plus 150 or at 150% magnification. Hopefully you guys can see this. So right here on the left, this is my typical PowerShell remoting session. So I just went and I said new PowerShell session against my JEA Demo 1 machine. I entered the session and I ran git command. And if we scroll down, we can see that I have access to a lot of commands, and I am running as an administrator. I'm an admin on that machine, so I can do any one of these things. In fact, I have access to around 1,700 commands, 1,696 commands. So I can do a lot of bad stuff to that system. I can also do a lot of good stuff. I can get my job done. On the right, you see this blue window. And in this blue window, I'm using JEA. So in this blue window, I'm going to run git command, the equivalent function. And I am not in that. Hold on just a second. I was unfortunately removed from the session, so I gotta re-enter it. My apologies. So I'm gonna run new session, and if you look here, I'm running configuration name maintenance EP1, and now I'm going to enter session $S, and now I run git command. And if you look at these commands that I have exposed, there is a very limited number of them. In fact, there's probably around 20 available right here. And if you look at which ones are exposed, you can see there's git help, git history, git member, git alias, a bunch of different pretty much harmless commands that we include by default, and then a few extra ones that I need to get my job done: git process, git service, restart computer, restart service, and stop process. But if I try and do a command that isn't on this list, like for example, I try and do git content c/temp/ let's look transcripts. Let's look. If I try and get content, I just tried to read this text file. The term get content is not recognized as the name of a commandlet, function, script, file, or operable program. I'm not allowed to run get content. I can only do the things on this list, which is pretty much the essence of JEA. I'm running as an administrator, and I can do all of these things, but I can do only these things. But I know what some of you guys are thinking. Well, you guys love PowerShell, so this is great for you. But I'm willing to bet that you have some coworkers that aren't really comfortable with PowerShell yet. There's a lot of, I don't want to say reluctance, but especially for junior administrators or operators, you know, guys who you might be outsourcing to, L1 support, you may not want to expose them to a PowerShell prompt. So what I have over here is the show command prompt, which now operates and works against remote sessions. So if you look, you can see that show command is actually reflecting the commands that are available to the user. I can filter by module. I can look in the maintenance toolkit, see all the commands that are available. I can run git process if I would like. This is interesting. I can run restart computer, although, there we go. Oh, that's weird. Not quite sure what's going on. I'm not going to force the restart of the computer, but I can say what if, insert it over here, and press enter. The show command window works as you expect. You would expect. So this is a non-PowerShell way to access JEA capabilities, or not a non-PowerShell way, but you don't have to stare at the prompt and type things in to make this happen. And that's good enough for some people, but for other people, what you really want to say is I want this guy to see these 4 buttons, and he can click on each of the 4 buttons, and when he clicks on one, it'll do one thing, and when he clicks on the other, it'll restart the computer. But I don't want him doing anything except for clicking these 4 buttons. He only needs to do these 4 things. And to do that, what I've got here is a super simple GUI. I built this in around 20 minutes using PowerShell Studio from Sapien. June Blender helped me out. If I had to do it again, it would probably take me 5 minutes. About 20 of those minutes were just getting familiar with the technology. And you can see I've got 4 little buttons here: restart IIS, restart the computer, get the processor load, which would be output here, and stop notepad. 4 pretty simple things that I made. And in terms of authoring that, I can actually show you what the script looked like. It's that long, and there's the little designer that shows you what it looks like. So that is our using JEA demo, all the way from I love the command prompt, we'll enter PS session and get the commands, all the way to my users shouldn't be seeing the command prompt at all. I just want this GUI to show them. So that's the using JEA demo. So back to the presentation. So one quick note about the JEA status. It was introduced over a year ago, I believe at TechEd North America, and was pretty well received. People liked the message that we're giving. What we're doing moving forward is we're bringing JEA into the box in Windows Server 2016, and customer feedback is driving improvements. So I want to let you guys know that if you're interested in using JEA, XJEA, it's available now. We're super interested in getting your feedback. My email is going to be at the end of this presentation. So just want to plug that in at the beginning rather than just at the end. So using JEA is a pretty simple experience. That's just about all you need to know. But using JEA is only one part of the equation. You guys are the PowerShell experts. You're probably going to be the ones authoring and deploying JEA. And so the rest of this presentation is really going to dive into those experiences and complexities. So we have 2 simple concepts in JEA, just enough admin. The first is the JEA Toolkit. And all the JEA Toolkit is it's a collection of commands designed to support a set of activities. So in the previous example, I had the maintenance toolkit, which here I can actually show you guys. I had the maintenance toolkit right here, and this had all of the commands that I thought would be useful for basic maintenance, whatever they are. It's a list I made up. For you guys, it might be a totally different experience, totally different set of commands. So that's a toolkit. It's a set of commands to support a set of activities. You might have an Active Directory toolkit, or you might have a L1 support toolkit, an L2 support toolkit, any different number of ways. And words are hard sometimes. The second simple concept we have is the JEA endpoint. The JEA endpoint is the connection point where authorized users run commands from JEA toolkits as an administrator. So that's a lot of words. It's the place where your operators go and they enter PS session, and then they get the list of commands that they can run. Those 20 commands, just what I saw. So the JEA endpoint is the connection point. The JEA toolkit is the set of commands, and they're separated. The real key insight here is that no matter what we call it, toolkit, endpoint, capability, constrained run space, whatever, deciding who should do what is the thing that requires the most effort when using JEA. Declaring it, which is what I'm going to dive into in the next couple slides, is pretty easy. Deploying it, it's not that hard, but figuring out which users should have access to which capabilities is what requires the most effort. So with that, authoring a toolkit. So let's go ahead and show that demo. So, and I see that link or Skype for Business is telling me that I have some messages. I will look at them at the end of the presentation and answer any questions at that point in time, but feel free to put them in the link window. So this, what I'm showing on screen right now, is the JEA Toolkit Helper. This is available online right now. Right now I'm working on a toolkit called Omaha Demo. Now, in this toolkit, I've added a list of commands. You can see I added get service, restart service, get process, stop process, restart computer, get counter. I've allowed certain parameters to go with certain commands or commandlets. So stop process, only allowing the name parameter with the notepad argument. And also stop process, I'm allowing the force parameter, but no other parameters other than that. Likewise with restart service, only allowing the name parameter, get counter, any parameter. You can see the pattern. Now if I want to add something to this list, all I have to do is to add get only commands for the SMB share module. So it added the SMB share module. Any command that matches the pattern get -* is now added to this toolkit. I can also add remove SMB share, and I can allow remove SMB share with a name. Let's see, there we go. And the name that I'm only going to allow you to remove my share, not my shame, my share. There we go. Or SMB share foobar. So as you can see, using the JEA Toolkit Helper, it makes it pretty easy to author toolkits and also to author, and it outputs a script that actually helps you deploy those toolkits as well. Now the other way that was initially the way that the other way to author toolkits, and what was initially conceived of as the way to do it, is the CSV method. So right now I've got Ignite JEA Toolkit .csv, and if you look inside here, I've got the same columns you've got, and I can go ahead and enter in remove SMB share dash name and my share. So this is an equivalent way to edit a toolkit, and again I'm just editing the capabilities that are going to be exposed to users, to operators using JEA. So SMB share, remove SMB share, equivalent functionality to the JEA Toolkit Helper. If you'd like, you can also edit JEA capabilities by hand. It's a little bit trickier because the CSV syntax means you have to be a little bit careful about where you add commas or don't add commas. So that's the authoring toolkits demo. So back to the presentation. So authoring a toolkit. So what you saw towards the end right there in the Toolkit Helper was actually a part of a DSC configuration. So 2 DSC resources. Now, if I were there in person, I'd ask you guys how many of you have heard of DSC, but I'm not, so we'll just go with it. So here we go. Here we have a toolkit and an endpoint defined. This is the way they look inside your script when you deploy them. I've named the toolkit Demo1 toolkit. I've defined it, just as I showed you. XJEA endpoint, I've defined it. It's got a name. It says which toolkit it exposes. It's also got the security descriptor SDDL, which defines which users have access to it. And it's got a little depends on. Now these are part of a broader configuration block, and so on this slide I have a configuration file servers, node, $node, whatever argument you provide, and on that node I want this JEA toolkit and this JEA endpoint, storage tools and storage EP. In storage tools, I'm just exposing all of the commands from the storage module and SMB share module. So this is a pretty simple example going on here. So this is a configuration, and you might be wondering, what is a configuration? What is DSC all about? Why don't we just make a set of commandlets and use those? And in order to explain that, we really need to explain desired state configuration. So when you author a traditional script used to set up a machine, there's a lot of things that go into it. Dependency resolution, you have to understand what it is you're trying to do, your intent. There's logging, reboot resiliency. You have to make it repeatable. You know, if there's some configuration drift, if you rerun it, you should probably end up in the same spot. And then you have to understand all of the underlying technologies that you're using. The goal of DSC is to separate your intent. This is what I want my machine to look like, from the technology-specific knowledge that you don't really necessarily need to have, and let the DSC engine handle all of that dependency resolution, the logging and error handling, the reboot resiliency, and the repeatable automation. So this is what DSC is all about, and JEA uses DSC to be deployed, and really, it's a prime example of this because JEA is built on existing PowerShell security technologies, stuff that's been around since PowerShell v2. It's been too hard to use, right? That technology-specific understanding required to make JEA work was something that most people didn't have, and it took too much effort to put into reality. So what we did with JEA is we wrote a DSC resource that encapsulated all that technology-specific knowledge about constrained run spaces, proxy commands, creating an admin account to run as, all of that stuff. And we let the DSC engine handle the deployment stuff and let you just worry about the intent. I want these users to be exposed to these commands that they can run as an administrator. So JEA is really a prime example of DSC. Now, DSC has two modes in order to make it a reality. It's got 4 stages and 2 modes. 4 stages. You author a DSC configuration, you compile it into a configuration document, which you then somehow deploy to your target systems where the make it so phase happens. So I can either author my DSC configuration in PowerShell, or theoretically I could do it with a third-party tool. They then get compiled into my configuration document. That configuration document can either be pushed out to the target nodes, or I can put it on a pull server and have it pulled, have the target nodes go and pull for new configurations. Once it's on the target machine, the configuration document gets sucked in by the DSC engine. The DSC engine calls into DSC resources. So in our case, it's calling into XJEA Endpoint and XJEA Toolkit, and those DSC resources make it a reality. They put all these toolkits and endpoints on the machine. So this is what DSC is all about. You're authoring, deploying, either using push or pull to make it a reality. So with that in mind, it's time to demo deploying JEA. So if we go over to JEA Demo DC, I'm going to go ahead and switch over to my purple console. And right here, I've got a Omaha demo configuration, which I'm deploying basically the exact same stuff I showed you guys earlier. I've got a Omaha demo toolkit. Inside this toolkit, I've got get service, restart service, stop process, all the git commands from SMB share and remove SMB share. And I've also got a JEA endpoint EP, JEA demo EP, where I'm exposing the JEA demo toolkit, and I've got a security scripter, SDDL, which defines which users can access it. And I know I can't read this. I doubt any of you can read it. But fortunately, because I use the JEA Toolkit Helper, it tells me what that SIDL actually means, and I can actually go and verify that in a little bit. So I've got that SDDL, and it says it depends on the JEA Toolkit Omaha demo. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to go ahead and we're going to run this configuration. So here we go. Gonna compile it. So this is the compilation phase. It generates a JEA demo1.mof file. It's basically a .text file. We can go and crack it open, and it's pretty easy to read. Don't recommend writing it yourself by hand. Now I'm going to take that mof file and I'm going to run start DSC configuration with it. The current version of JEA I'm using on the April WMF, there's an error that shows up that doesn't mean anything, but because we don't like red text, I'm actually catching the error and preventing it from displaying. So that's all this if statement is doing. With the next WMF, it should go away. So right now what's going on is we're applying this configuration. If we look here, you can see all the stuff that's going on. So JEA Toolkit demo, it tested for that, and then Omaha demo EP, it's testing. It didn't find Omaha demo EP, so it's starting to set Omaha demo EP, and now the configuration is done in 16.9 seconds. So I have gone ahead and I've applied this new endpoint. So now what I can do is I can do what I did before, make a new PS session for the Omaha demo EP as the user that is allowed to connect. And after I make that new PS session, I can enter PS session and remote and manage my machine. And if we look here, I can run git command, and you can see that I've got a limited number of commands available to me, and they happen to be the ones, or they don't happen to be, they are the ones from the Omaha demo toolkit, and you can see all of these git commands from the SMB share module that were exposed. So that is what deploying using push mode looks like. So here we go, back to my slides. So earlier in the presentation, I told you guys that there were two simple concepts that you really needed to use JEA, and that was a lie. There are really three simple concepts that you need to use to deploy JEA, and the third is PowerShell modules. Now the reason why PowerShell modules become important when using JEA is, as we've done customer visits, we've visited customers or talked to customers about using JEA, a common thread among most customers is that they don't just want to expose the built-in commands in Windows. Those are useful, but invariably they've got collections of scripts or functions that they want to use that they've built up over the years. You guys, probably the maintainers of many of those at your work, and they want to expose those through JEA. And PowerShell modules is the way to do that. So PowerShell modules are either built-in, so we've been using the built-in PowerShell modules, or you can author them yourselves, and they can contain your custom authored functions for your environment. And when you author those functions, you can expose them through the JEA toolkit, and the JEA endpoint will then allow users to run them without modifying them. So, demo custom commands. So hopping back to my demo machine, if you look to the right here, you will see I have an add-on called the module browser. Now, the module browser, the way I got it was right here. I went to the add-ons drop-down from, from ISC. I said get module browser add-on. It took me to some download page. I downloaded it and installed it. After doing that, I've got the module browser. This is fairly new. in the My Collection tab of the module browser, I can click New Module. I select where the module wanted to go. I want the module to go. In order to use with JEA or DSC, I need to put it in program files. I select that. The name of the module will be Hello Omaha. Maybe I should make a Peyton Manning joke. I don't know. And the description will be a demo module for the Omaha PowerShell user group. I can add additional metadata if I want, functions to export, yada, yada, yada. I click Create. I was doing that within, it tried to run a command from within my JEA demo. I was remoting into the other machine. So now that I am out of there, I can actually go and redo this. My apologies. Hello Omaha, foobar, hello Omaha, create. What is going on? Oh, I am running PowerShell not as an administrator. That's what's going on. I'm trying to save this module as an admin, but I am not an admin. There we go. That's what's going on. Apologize, guys. So here, third time's the charm. So here we go. Program files. Add a new module. Third time. Wish me luck. I'm going to create the module, and it goes and it creates a third time PSD1 module file. It's got it filled out. It's got my description. It's got copyright, company name, author, GUID, so on and so forth. And it also creates a third time.psm1. Now, you could have done this yourself using the new module manifest command, filling it in by hand, creating a third time.psm1, putting both of those in C/program files /Windows PowerShell /modules /third time folder, made sure everything was right. But that's one of those things where you kind of had to know what you wanted to do. And once you knew it, it was pretty easy, but there were plenty of places to trip up, and it really gave people a hard time. So this module browser add-on is a very easy way to author a new module, add new functionality. So now I just press Control J, I got my snippets, I can add a new function, do something, and this is where you would put the body of your whatever custom script you've written, whatever you guys need to do through PowerShell that you want to expose to operators. So let's just run git command, right? This will be a good demo. So third time, git command. So I've authored a module, and now I'm going to try and expose it through, there we go. I'm going to try and expose it through the Omaha toolkit that I authored earlier. So over here, if we go back, remember we're in our Omaha toolkit where we have all of the commands that we're exposing through our JEA endpoint. And in this Omaha toolkit, I am going to expose the do something command. Hopefully I haven't authored that command before. Do something. It takes no arguments, but I can run it. I'm going to save it. Now if I try and run this configuration, it's going to fail. And the reason why it's going to fail is because the third time module is not on the machine I'm deploying it to. So the do something command doesn't exist over there. So what I'm going to add is I'm going to add a file resource. Copied and pasted it down here. Add the file resource to this command, or to this configuration. So now this configuration is not only going to deploy a JEA toolkit, it's going to ensure that custom module file is going to be there. Now inside here, I'm going to expose the third time module folder, and I'm going to put it in C program files, Windows PowerShell modules / third time, recurse true, type directory, checksum modified date. And this source path, I actually created an SMB share on my local machine. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to come over to program files, Windows PowerShell modules third time, copy that, stick it in my share. So the third time folder is there. And now when I run this configuration, that custom module should be copied to the remote machine, or the remote machine should go and grab it, and then it will take the JEA toolkit with the do something command, as well as the JEA endpoint that exposes it. And when I enter that endpoint, I should be able to type do something and see a list of commands. So hopefully this works. I'm going to go ahead and run my command. So I'm going to run and compile it. So it's compiled. Now I'm going to start configuration with it. So it's going through. One thing to call out right here is DSC is much faster the second time you run it. So this time it didn't have to worry about creating a new endpoint. So you can see, if I pull up here, you can see it said skip set. So it skipped setting the endpoint because the endpoint was already in the desired state. So it only took 2 seconds to run the second time. So now after running this, I should be able to come down. Create a new PowerShell session, and then remote into that session after it's created. Oh, it is also telling me that I used an unapproved verb. That is a great point. I should have used an approved verb. Shame on me. But when I run git command, do something, we see I have do something, and when I run it, I get a list of commands that are available. So you might be saying, this is a much longer list than the commands that are actually available to the user. And you are right. The do something command is running unrestricted. So this is an important thing to call out. While the user is exposed, if I run git command here, the user is only exposed to these commands. Your custom scripts that you put in your modules, your custom scripts that you put into your modules have access to all of the PowerShell commands that are on the system. So that's an important thing to call out, something that people sometimes get confused by. The user is restricted, but the commands they are running are not restricted. So that was the demo of custom commands. And now there's one more thing to talk about, and that is auditing with JEA. So auditing is really useful because it helps you identify suspicious activity. The PowerShell logs have been enhanced. One way they've been enhanced is improved transcripting. The transcripts, it's just better. I don't know if the white paper has been released, but Lee Holmes is releasing a white paper talking about all of the improvements to PowerShell security and transcripting. That's probably the best resource there. But transcripts will give you a play-by-play log of what users were doing. Event collection is another important thing that goes on, and then the PowerShell logs have also been enhanced. So with that, there's a couple of demos I'd like to show you with logging and transcripting. One is on this JEA Demo 1 machine. Let me look here. Oh, not on this machine. Oops. On the JEA Demo DC machine, nope. On my host machine, I pulled up a transcript. There we go. And in this transcript, you can see a play-by-play of what I did and what I saw as a user. So here's my PowerShell prompt. It tells me I configured it so that it added the start time that my this command was run. I ran get module list available. Here's all of the output that I saw. So transcripting is it's a pretty useful thing. And in PowerShell vNext, the transcript will also include the run as user as well as the connected user. So when you're using JEA, if you do a transcript, it'll record not only the person who it's running as, so that local administrator account, but it will also include the account used to connect to that JEA endpoint. Useful thing. The second thing I'm going to show you guys is a little demo of the enhanced PowerShell logs. So over here, I've got a command, invoke expression, invoke web request, bit.ly, bunch of characters. So imagine if you're going through the logs after a malicious person has been on your systems and you see this. You don't know what this was doing, right? It was running some script that pulled off of the web. And so in this example, it's going to run the script and I'm going to pump up my volume. It should work, unless it's not connected to the internet. Interesting. We'll open up a new PowerShell prompt. Give it a try. Go. Here we go. All right. So hopefully you guys can hear that. That is Rick ASCII. So if I can get it to quit. There we go. Happy scripting from PowerShell and Rick ASCII. This is something that Lee Holmes put up on his blog. It's one of my favorite demos by far to give. And so in the old PowerShell, you wouldn't necessarily know what that script was doing, but with the new improved PowerShell logs, I actually ran this earlier. I found the log, creating script log text 1 of 1, player equals new object, com object, media player, player open, http www.leeholmes.background.mp3. So you can actually go through the logs and you can see what exactly that script was doing. So it's not really, it's tangentially related to JEA, but it's a really useful PowerShell security feature that I wanted to drop in just because I can. Then there's one final thing to talk about, and I'll wrap things up. Privileged access management integration. So JEA you can think about as capability limited administration. So you're not an admin, but you can run as an admin to do these 5 things. Privileged access management, PAM, JIT, just-in-time administration, is time-limited administration. So you can think about this as you're not an admin, but you can elevate to be an admin for the next 5 minutes, or the next 2 hours, or the next 8 hours. But after that 8 hours is up, you're back to not being an admin. So when you combine these 2 things together, JEA and PAM JIT, you can end up with administration that's limited in both capability and administration that's limited in time. So the basic flow that goes on with just-in-time administration is you assign a user to a role, and the role is pending an elevation process from Jen. As Jen, the admin, asks to elevate, she goes through some process. She asks, either she's automatically approved, maybe multi-factor authentication is required, maybe it emails her boss and her boss has to approve her, maybe there's any number of things you can require for her to elevate to be an administrator. Once she's elevated, her role is active, and when we're talking about combining just-in-time with JEA, the admin Jen would get elevated to a group that has access to a JEA endpoint. So for the next 2 hours, you can access this JEA endpoint and run whatever commands are in it. And then finally, after the elevation period ends, the role is not active for Jin anymore. No more do you have to add someone to some admin group for 2 days so they can do something and then remember to remove them. It's all automated. Under the hood, because all you guys are PowerShell experts, JEA is really just constrained run spaces with no language mode. Constrained run spaces running in no language mode, running as a local administrator, and it's generating proxy commands so we can do that filtering based on regular expression as well as based on parameter. There's some restrictions when using JEA. One, it's entirely through PowerShell remoting. So some customers have processes that they don't use PowerShell to do these things and they want to restrict the capabilities. You have to use PowerShell remoting to take advantage of JEA. Two, it's running in no language mode. And what this means is it's a very restricted set of the PowerShell language. You cannot assign variables when you're in no language mode. If you try and run 2 plus 2, you can't. I can demo it, but actually I have no clue how much time I have left. 3, it's running as a local administrator, which causes some problems when you're in situations like on a domain controller. On a domain controller, there's no real concept of local administrator. So, or there is, but there isn't. It gets complicated. JEA doesn't work on domain controllers as a consequence. And then 4, it depends on the Windows Management Framework 5.0 preview. The latest version goes down to 2008 R2, 2012, and 2012 R2. Now the current status of JEA, I talked to this a little bit earlier, but we have XJEA, which is available today. It's on the PowerShell gallery. I don't know if you guys have seen that. It's experimental, and it's built on top of the existing PowerShell security technologies that I just talked about. JEA, not with the X means experimental, but just JEA will be available with Windows Server vNext, which is Windows Server 2016. It will incorporate customer feedback from XJEA. It'll be stable, not experimental, and it'll be built into PowerShell security technologies. So JEA concepts will no longer be layered on top, but they will actually be built into PowerShell session configurations and stuff like that. The syntax may change, but as I mentioned earlier, most of the work is actually determining which users have access to which commands. And just to show you guys where you can find JEA, if I go here, I type in PowerShellGallery.com, and I search XJEA. The XJEA page, I see the command where with WMF5 I can install the XJEA module. This is XJEA version 0.2.16.6 and was published, I believe, May 14th, so not that long ago. So that's how to get JEA, and that's the current status of JEA. So just to wrap things up, admins are an attack surface, something you guys should be aware of, and our goals for JEA is to reduce that attack surface, to understand it and mitigate it. So reduce the number of full administrators, limit the movement of full admin accounts. One thing I didn't really talk about earlier was that the account you're running as is a local administrator, which means if or when that machine gets compromised, if they do a pass the hash attack or something like that, and they get that full admin account, it's only useful on that machine. It doesn't help them spider out across the network. 3, it allows you granular control over admin actions. You can specify lists of commands, whole modules, specific commands with specific parameters, accepting regular expressions for certain arguments. And then 4, it logs all admin actions. It's got simple concepts, the JEA Toolkit, the JEA Endpoint. It uses desired state configuration and PowerShell modules as well. At Black Hat 2010, someone asked Michael Hayden, what do we do about all of these attacks? And his answer was, man up and defend yourselves. So the real takeaway is that it's up to you guys to understand your attack surface. Nobody's going to come and save you guys. Jeffrey does a much better job of saying this, but really, we're trying to give you tools in order to help you reduce your attack surface. Feedback is requested. We're looking for partners or preview customers to deploy JEA, give us feedback on next versions of JEA, so on and so forth. If you try and deploy it and you run into any blockers, please let us know. My email is john.slack@microsoft.com. So please just feel free to email me. And yeah, that's the end of the presentation.
Do you have some time for any questions, John?
Oh, absolutely. I am here for you guys.
Anybody here have any questions while we look through the chat? All right, we got a couple questions in the chat log, I think.
Yes. All right. PS Cookie Monster. Is there an option to specify a domain account for the delegation? Not with the current version of JEA. One of the goals was to really, the term we use is a blast container. When you use JEA, the machine is in a blast container, so even if it gets compromised, it won't let them spider out. That's certainly one of the things we're thinking about for vNext of JEA, so I'll make a note that that's something that you're after. Jeff Hicks asked, when JEA is stable, will it be backported? And JEA will be part of PowerShell, so it'll be built in, so it will go anywhere that WMF goes and PowerShell goes. So with every release of Windows, we've released a WMF that goes alongside it, and that will be the same with Windows Server 2016. All right, and I think that those were the two questions that came up. June mentioned that when I showed that super simple GUI, June helped me do that, and she's going to be presenting for you guys. Super lucky, so you should listen to her. Yep, any other questions?
I don't think so. I think we're good to go, John. Thanks for your time.
All right, thank you guys.
All right, have a good night.
Yep, you too.
Bye.